He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see, it's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Welcome to our very special Heartland Journal Summer Series, where we have dug deep into the archives and unearthed some of our most popular and even controversial shows of the past, many that haven't seen the light of day in years. We hope you enjoy what we have in store for you. Until I return to my post as host of the Heartland Journal podcast, this is Steve Abramowitz wishing you a safe and sane summer. And as always, glory to God. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. On this show, we are focused on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. This time, special guest, Chloe Cole. But first, for more information about the Mill Creek View podcast, visit us anywhere you get your podcasts and socials at Mill Creek View, Tennessee. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe. Welcome to our People in the News episode, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with Chloe Cole. Chloe is a young activist who opposes gender-affirming care for minors and supports bans on such care following her own detransition. She began transitioning at 12 and detransitioned at 17 after having undergone treatment, which includes puberty blockers, testosterone, and a double mastectomy. In May 2022, Cole testified in support of Ohio House Bill 454, which would ban gender-affirming care for minors. Cole testified in favor of an eventually passed Florida bill that denied Medicaid coverage for procedures that alter primary or secondary sexual characteristics for both adults and children. Cole testified against a bill introduced by Senator Scott Wiener to make California a sanctuary state for children seeking gender-affirming care. She filed a 90-day notice of intent to sue against the healthcare company Kaiser Permanente, along with the individual endocrinologist, psychiatrist, and plastic surgeon involved in her treatment. Chloe, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're back in Tennessee, best place on earth. What's going on for you here this week?
Not much. I have quite a few friends over here, and I just wanted to visit them for the time being before
Excellent.
I move on to the next trip.
I bet they're great people. All right. Well, you might not know this, but I've had some people on here pretty recently, actually, almost like a theme. They are very interested in you and your story. Joey Bright, Amy Souza, Tiffany Justice of Moms for Liberty, and Riley Gaines all want to hear this show when I'm done. So I hope I do a good job. Do you know those women's rights names?
Oh yeah, they're pretty cool people.
That's great. Okay. Well, hopefully I do them justice and you justice. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything, just a guy that has a lot of questions. So I don't want to make you feel like I'm prosecuting you. I'm just wanting to get to know you and understand what you went through to get here. Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
Great. You did a very emotional interview with Jordan Peterson. He is all of that, a psychiatrist. People can watch that. You cried, he cried, I cried watching it. Joey told me about it. So I don't want to make you cry. I just want people to understand you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So my goal is to hear how you made your decisions. It's called informed consent in the medical field, and what you heard that made up your mind and then changed your mind afterwards by the end. Can we start in the beginning of your journey and talk about your life before you ever even heard of or thought of transition?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Um,
What was your childhood like as a baby to toddler? What was your upbringing?
when I was a baby, I guess I was kind of colicky. I would cry a lot. Like, I was really hard to console, and I was kind of, throughout a lot of my childhood, I was kind of difficult to bring up for that reason. Like, I had a lot of issues with emotional dysregulation, and I feel like I kind of even might have had some attachment issues growing up.
Hmm.
Not because my parents were like abusive or neglectful or anything. I don't know if it's just like something that happened or something that happened at birth. I mean, when I was born, and I don't think this happened within the Kaiser Hospital, but I almost died because the nurse, when my mom was in labor, she was given too much of the medication to treat her pain as she was birthing me. And the nurses weren't really monitoring her. And so when I came out, I was almost dead. I was blue. I wasn't breathing. My dad was crying. My mom and dad didn't think that I would even make it, but they managed to resuscitate me and I made it.
Hmm.
But as a baby, more like when I was a toddler, my parents started noticing that I had a pretty artistic side. Like I would just fill a bunch of notebooks and printer papers and scrap paper with a bunch of scribbles and artwork um, of like cartoons that I watched, especially like some stuff that we had on VHS, like some Disney movies, Sailor Moon, Teen Titans. That was airing when I was roughly like a toddler to an early child. And I really like drawing Beast Boy from what I can remember. Um,
From the X-Men.
and there was a game that I played because of my older siblings. It's called Animal Crossing. It's kind of like, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like, not quite like The Sims. It's sort of like you move into like a village that's like filled with a bunch of like anthropomorphic animals and you like build relationships with them. You build your own house. And you also go into debt to a talking raccoon. And the game, it doesn't really have like it's not dubbed in English. It kind of just has like the animals speak in like a, not like mumbling, but it's like gibberish, and it has subtitles. But because I was like 3 to 5 years old when I first started playing it, I couldn't read these subtitles. But so I would always ask like my mom and dad to read it for me, and eventually they got sick of that, so they started asking all of my older siblings, which I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I've got 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, each about like 6 to 8 years older than me. And eventually they also got sick of reading the subtitles for me for this game. And one day they just heard me quietly reading these subtitles of the game to myself. And they're like, oh my gosh, she learned how to read. How did she do that? So apparently I used this game to teach myself how to read English. And from a pretty
Interesting.
young age, I was pretty proficient in things like reading comprehension, writing, and I loved reading books.
Were you
But
close to these
while
siblings and comfortable enough to confide in them as you were having feelings that you didn't understand?
Um, I mean, I think the age gap between me and them made that kind of difficult. Like by the time that I was in like the middle of elementary school, they were in high school or like they were all like seniors, juniors in high school and graduating. And so it was kind of hard to relate to them at times. And because they were teenagers, I looked up to them as my older siblings, and whenever they had friends around, like I wanted to be around them and I wanted to just be a part of the group. But because they were in their teens, like they didn't necessarily want to have me around all the time, especially with their friends, and the subjects that they would talk about weren't necessarily appropriate for a kid my age. So they didn't always want me to be a part of their social interaction with their peers. And so it
Sure.
was kind of, at times growing up, it was kind of lonely. And I felt like it was kind of hard for me as a kid, as the youngest, to communicate and to be listened to at times. And while I was a pretty smart kid, I had difficulties with socializing growing up with both my own family and especially with my own peers. I got bullied quite a bit in my early elementary years, and I found it difficult to make and keep friends.
Were you a two-parent household, and were the
Yeah,
two parents the same parents for all the children?
yeah.
Okay.
So actually, all my siblings are all half siblings, so I only share one parent each with them. my mom and dad both had a son and daughter with another spouse before they got together and had me.
And would you consider it a loving parent-daughter relationship, or
Yeah.
were they busy working two jobs and so they were out of the house a lot, like a latchkey kid, like I was? Any kind of maybe memories of just not feeling a part of a big family, even though it was a big family?
I mean, I'd say they were pretty loving growing up, but they were also quite busy. My dad was between jobs for a while, and my mom, she works as a nurse, so you can imagine she was often pretty busy.
Yeah. Was she at
Um,
Kaiser by chance?
yeah, she was.
She was. And did you have adult friends or best friends during this phase when you said it was kind of lonely because the brothers and sisters were older and out of the house and parents working? Did you have anyone to confide in, or did you have to really go through not only learning to read alone, but making your decisions that would lead to today alone?
Um, I mean, sometimes I would hang out with other kids my age, but I often had problems with them for one reason or another. And so at home, I mean, I never really ever went to other kids' houses that much. I would mostly spend my time at home, either getting lost in a book or playing video games with my older brothers, or I would create my own world with using like my own drawings. I would make up all kinds of stories and characters, and sometimes I would kind of use it as like a coping mechanism.
The escapism into a book or a video game, you mean? To
Yeah.
those animated characters were kind of your figuratively friends. I had an imaginary friend growing up, so I get that. As an only child, so it was easier for me. And my dog is laying here on painkillers. She had a broken tooth extracted yesterday. I see on
Oh,
Twitter you have a picture with a dog. Is that you're like your best friend now? What's its name?
yeah, her name's Yoshi. She's currently with my sister right now, and I do miss her quite a bit, but I think like since I'm traveling so much right now, she doesn't get to see me very often, and I feel like she might be happier in a home where like my older sister has two cats and another dog, which she doesn't really like other dogs very much, but I mean, I think she kind of needs to be able to learn how to coexist with other dogs anyway, since she is one.
That's true.
But
Mine's not
I mean,
nice with
I
the
love, yeah, I love my dog to death. She's a big dork, and she's very smart. Like I remember one time, I dropped her off at my aunt's for a few days because I was going on vacation, and when I came back to pick her up, my aunt like came up to me and said like, you know, your dog is like, she's very smart. Kind of freaks me out actually because it's like she understands what I'm saying, and she does. Like I'll ask her where something is, and she'll go looking for it. Sometimes she'll retrieve it. Sometimes she won't because she has a will of her own, really.
wow. And so, would you say that I don't want to be psychoanalyzing, but would you say that your relationship with this dog is like closer than some of these people that you were growing up with that we're talking about? Or did you have any activists or child psychologists around you that you bonded with?
Well, I didn't get my dog until about my freshman year of high school, so that was a little bit later in life. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my I didn't really feel like I had much of a community around me growing up, especially in my early childhood. And eventually, after like my fourth grade year, I was finally able to make friends. But then I moved neighborhoods, and subsequently I had to move schools as well. So I was back at square one. And
Mhm.
the school, I found it especially difficult to fit in at. Both like teachers and school staff and students weren't really the nicest to me. And this is also the school year that they started handing out devices to students. And starting at fifth grade, they would allow students to take them home every night. So, I mean, naturally, I kind of got hooked on the internet. And I did have a personal PC of my own at home. But now the internet and like social media was everywhere with me, including at school, so I
What
could
age
get
did you
distracted.
get? What age did you get social media and Instagram and a phone?
Um, before my 6th or 7th grade year, when I was 11 years old, was when I got my first iPhone. And pretty much the first thing I did was make a social media account because all the other kids my age were using social media, especially like Snapchat and Instagram. So of course, like, excuse me, I'm missing out on this thing that everybody else my age is using. So, I mean, why wouldn't I want to see what's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the window to the world for a lot of people. And so by 12, like the next year, you and I'm not telling a secret, this is public, you've told us that you were in therapy. What was the catalyst that got you into therapy? And did they ever talk to you about social media and the phone at your age?
Yeah, I didn't start seeing a therapist until I told my parents that I wanted to be a son instead of their daughter. And I mean, before that, I had been diagnosed with ADHD by a psychiatrist, I think when I was roughly about 8 years old. And then I had a reevaluation at maybe like 11 or 10 and they started putting me on medication when I was, I think, between like 10 to 11 years old.
For ADHD or for autism?
ADHD, but
Okay.
I don't think that was an accurate Now I don't think that was an accurate diagnosis. I think most of my symptoms just came from being raised on the internet and the screen being more interesting than, say, like my math homework. Because a lot of kids are like that now.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And
No
I
question.
mean, it seems to coincide with them being on the screen all the time, like either having school devices or their parents just like shoving an iPad in their face during car rides and stuff like that.
Now, the internet obviously has a lot of images, of course, body images, men, women. Of course, if you make the wrong click, like you said, and most of these school issued devices don't have filters on them, you could end up in pornographic situations, especially for somebody who's young.
Oh yeah.
Did any of this affect you, maybe in hindsight, at too young of an age to see such things, or not an issue?
Yeah, I think my first encounter of pornography was actually on my school device. But I first heard about things like sex a lot younger through my peers, when I was in elementary school. I had a lot of very precocious peers who, of course, were using the internet, and their parents were like really, really lax, allowed them to watch movies and browse the internet as they pleased and not really watch over them as they did so. And so they learned about a lot of things that they shouldn't have known at the age that they did. And then, of course, they're kids, so they're going to spread it to their peers. And I learned about things like sex and how boys and men look at women's bodies at a very young age. And so I kind of, both through that sort of influence and also from using social media so young, I kind of learned that a lot of my worth as a woman came from my sexuality and from my body and my looks.
And you were just a little girl then. You didn't really have
Right.
developments. Okay. So maybe looking at the images online gave you a misunderstanding of where you should be at your age when you weren't there yet. Maybe 15, 20 years from then, you could look back and say, look, I look like Pamela Anderson or whatever the ideal is, but not that day. To digress just a little bit, I was looking at your Twitter feed today and you said non-binary is made up. What is non-binary?
So non-binary is, I guess the way to put this in simplest terms would be a gender identity that's neither male nor female, or a mix of the two, or something in between. And it doesn't make sense because it doesn't exist.
Right.
It doesn't exist in nature.
It's a bit of a fantasy.
Right.
Have you heard the phrase true trans?
Yes, I have.
I have not until yesterday. Do you have a definition at this point, now that you've kind of experienced transitioning? What is a transgender and how do you hear about it as an option for somebody's life?
So some people say that being transgender is an innate thing. It's a state of being, and you're either not trans or you're cisgender, or you are trans, and that's how you'll be for the rest of life. And sometimes these transgender activists will tell me that because my transition didn't work out for me, because it didn't resolve my gender dysphoria, because I went back on my decision, that I wasn't actually transgender because of this. Or some people even say that I actually am transgender still, but I'm repressing it. The way I see it, though, being transgender is not an innate thing at all. It's a choice that you make.
Hmm. Do you think making that choice and autism had anything to do with each other?
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I really strongly believe that I'm on the spectrum. Unfortunately, I've had several screenings in my life, and I was not given the autism diagnosis because, well, the first screening I had, I think I was like a preschooler. I must have been like 4 to 5 years old, maybe a little bit older. And my teachers at the time noticed like I interacted pretty unusually with my peers and my teachers. And they told my parents, like, we think your kid might be on the spectrum, so it might be worthwhile to get her to a psychiatrist and maybe get a screening for it. But the pediatrician just told my mom and dad, like, yeah, like your kid is really smart. I don't think it's possible that she's autistic. As if like I wasn't stupid enough to be autistic, basically,
Yeah.
which is which is really biased considering that most people on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum are actually very intelligent. But I had another screening when I was about 8 years old because my parents were frustrated because I was still struggling in school and with socializing with other kids my age. And instead, I was given diagnosis for ADHD. Again, I think that was erroneous. I don't think that was correct.
And
Um,
they medicated you for that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. Like
No. Well, it was
for a while, it
misdiagnosed,
helped.
maybe. So
Yeah,
yeah. Do
for
you
a
think?
while, it helped
Sorry. Go ahead.
with like concentrating, but eventually the medication would wear off and it would stop working over time. And so they would keep increasing the dose over and over again to the
Mm,
point that I think they told me like I was taking like an adult male dose
mm,
of ADHD medication at some point when I was like barely pubescent. And then eventually they kept switching me between medications and just rinse and repeat. I had another screening when I was about 16 years old for autism, which it's interesting because it was actually my gender specialist, the same one who referred me to surgery, who told me that she noticed that I had some symptoms of autism. And I pretty much got the same response again this time. That was like, yeah, you're really intelligent, you're very well spoken, but because of that, we're not exactly sure if you're autistic. Like we're sure that it might be a possibility, but we don't think now is the time for you to get diagnosed, which really sucked because it would have been opportune because I was still a kid at the time and it would have been easier for me to get resources to treat it, especially like my difficulties with socializing.
Do you think autism, if you did have it or were diagnosed with it, do you think it made you more susceptible to the images and the messages that you saw on social media that ultimately changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, from a pretty young age, I've had some sensory issues, like sometimes having to do with like textures of mostly like clothing. I never really had like an issue with food all that much, I don't think. except I really didn't like yogurt. I didn't like the mouthfeel of it, and I especially hated the smell of it. Like I remember as a kid, I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but like whenever like somebody at the house, like my older sister or mom, like opened up like a thing of Greek yogurt, like the smell was just unbearable to me. Like I would cry until
Hmm.
it was like thrown to the garbage out of the room. But I would also have issues with like noises. I hated being anywhere that was loud or any
Mm.
like loud sudden noises. Um, but I've always had like a tendency to hyperfixate on things. And as I went into puberty, my body happened to be one of them because now I'm also kind of routine oriented, and now like my body was rapidly changing, and this came kind of out of the blue when I was pretty young. I was 9 years old when my breast started to visibly develop, and on one hand, like I was kind of excited to grow up into an adult woman and to be pretty, but on the other hand, like I felt kind of ugly from a very young age. I felt like there was something wrong with the way something that was setting me apart from my peers. And I felt like my looks were one of those things, that I was ugly, and that's why I was being treated so strangely by my peers, why I didn't have any friends. And this got worse the further I got into puberty and the more that I used social media, because I was noticing and picking out all these changes in my body, and I felt like all the changes that I felt like weren't happening quickly enough. I remember being like 11 or 12 and looking at myself and wondering why I didn't have big curves yet, why my boobs were so small, why my hips weren't so developed, why I had such a round tummy and a chubby waist. And I hated it. I hated the muscle in my upper body and in my big shoulders and the my frame being, I felt, more boyish than it should have been. And because I wasn't necessarily the most feminine, I liked having my hair short and wearing boys' clothing, and I had some more masculine interests and felt like I related to boys more, especially like in terms of like my sense of humor. That I just didn't understand why I was made to be a woman sometimes.
Mm.
And there were
The
times when I
teenage
felt
years are
like,
very difficult, and often teenage girls suffer from depression. Did you have depression?
um, I mean, I had some depressive symptoms, but I wasn't diagnosed with depression until I was about midway through my gender transition.
Was it depressing, or was there some outside thing, or do you think it was more like a genetic chronic condition of depression? There's so many different definitions of depression these days.
Well, I don't know if it was genetic. I doubt it was, but there were definitely a lot of compounding issues that made it so that I had a lot of depressive tendencies. Um, Especially being that like I struggled socially, and at home, like by the time I was in middle school, pretty much all my siblings had moved out, and I didn't really feel like I had much of a place to call home because I didn't really have like any issues with my mom and dad, and I loved them, of course, but I wasn't particularly close to them, and so it would feel like I would go home from school, which was like pretty much my only real source of social interaction, and even then, like I didn't really have any real relationships with anybody, and by the time that I went home, all I had was the internet, pretty much.
Yeah. So let me ask you, gender dysphoria. My understanding is that means suffering anxiety and depression with a dissatisfaction with the body. Does that ring true? Is that what that is, or do I have it completely wrong?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. Especially like in relation to one's sex or wanting to actually be or just be perceived as the opposite sex.
So how would one know, let's say that they had a gender dysphoria illness or whatever you want to call it, gender dysphoria feelings versus saying I'm a boy in a girl's body, maybe.
I mean, I feel like the term gender dysphoria is so broad
Yeah.
that it could apply to almost anybody who feels like they don't like their interests or the way they look or another part of themselves doesn't necessarily align with most members of their sex. And if they have body image issues, especially relating to their secondary sex characteristics. And that was certainly the case for me. And
When you
I
say it was the
mean,
case for you, do you mean maybe you had gender dysphoria and not being a transhuman or transgender person in hindsight? Is that what you mean? Or did I misunderstand you?
I think I did have gender dysphoria,
Okay.
but like I said, being transgender isn't an innate thing. And even for people who suffer from this condition, it's not necessarily the end all be all for treating it, because oftentimes people, and especially children and adolescents who experience distress relating to their sex, there is some underlying issue relating to their perception of their sex, of themselves. Um, Oftentimes these kids will have like a history of having been sexually abused or assaulted, especially at a very young age, or they didn't really have a very strong maternal or paternal figure growing up, or they'd been abused by a family member physically or emotionally.
And you were affected at school, right? You're public
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, that happened to you. So was that one of the major factors in what's going on? Because my point about teenage depression, obviously elevated suicidal thoughts if you're depressed, and then anxiety over this dysphoria, let's say negative emotions, which also spikes in adolescent girls, would definitely confuse and lead to a lot of confusion that you would turn to a medical professional to say, can you help me with this? And ultimately for you, the result was surgery and all the rest that you had to go through. Was the abuse at school, the bullying you mentioned, and then worse, pretty much the driver?
It was definitely a huge part of it. I wasn't sexually assaulted until I was actually a bit early into my transition. So it happened while I was identifying as a boy, and I'd say that it pushed me further into it because this person attacked my breast. A part of me that at the time I wasn't really making an effort to hide because I thought nobody really cared. Like I knew like they all saw me as a biological female, and there wasn't really much I could do about that.
Mm.
All I could really do was just make an effort to pass as the opposite sex. Um, but now I was very conscious. I was even more conscious of this part of my body, and I was afraid of something like that ever happening ever again. Especially because some girls, before it happened, some girls told me like, well, he was bullying me throughout the school year, but they said, well, he's not actually going to hurt you. Like, there's no way he's going to do that. And so it kind of broke my trust in the people around
Sure.
me at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what would happen if I told any school administrators about it because, I mean, they didn't like me very much, and they'd probably not give this kid a very fitting punishment for what he did. And chances are, like, he could come back to school after like maybe like a 2 day long suspension, and he could do something worse to me. Like he could rape
Sure.
me
Sure.
if he knows that like I tried to get that I reported him doing this,
And were you
and I
were
didn't want
you
to.
were you dressing and wearing your hair and acting as a not acting, sorry, being a boy at this time, or were
Yeah,
you okay? Were you wearing binders afterwards? Was that the motivation for the binder
yeah. I didn't buy any binders until after that happened. Yeah.
after that happened? How'd you get that? Is that something people just get online, or what did you do?
Yeah, it was online.
Okay, so more as a shield almost than to do that to your chest, or were you just didn't want those breasts anymore because they were now a target or a well, you tell me what made you decide binders was the way to go?
I mean, it was kind of a mix of those two things. Like I wanted to protect myself from being sexually assaulted ever again. And I also just hated the idea of like this visibly female part of me being seen by other people, especially because at that time, like I was in the mindset of being a boy and I was a few months into taking testosterone as well.
What age
So
was
it was
that?
like, I mean, I was a few months into taking testosterone by that point as well.
What age was that?
Oh, I was 13 years old. It was in my 8th grade year.
13. Okay. Wow. And were you attracted to women, or were you attracted to men, or did you have any, because that's the prepubescent years, and you said that you had early puberty, let's say, which you ended up going into blocking after the early. Did you have desires of the opposite sex or the same sex at all during that period?
Um, I mean, it's kind of complicated. I consider myself straight for the most part. But growing up, sometimes I would have like romantic or sexual thoughts about other girls. And I wouldn't say it really played much of a role into my transition, but I mean, I was mostly attracted to boys.
Hmm.
And this, by transitioning, I kind of compromised my dating pool in doing so.
Yeah. I'm curious, Chloe. So some of these things you've told us, and thank you so much for your honesty. I mean, unbelievable. But we would call them now pre-existing conditions, right? Things that were being, whether it's ADD or autism or any of this dysphoria that we're talking about, they're not resolved just because you're transitioning back or detransitioning, whatever we want to call it these days for expediency's sake. Have you gotten any help, or has anyone talked to you about what was ailing you before the surgery to still work on the, let's say, the issues, the things that troubled you so much?
I mean, throughout the whole process, I had pretty crappy psychological evaluations for the diagnosis of my gender dysphoria. Before I was put on hormones, before I was put on surgery, there was an evaluation during the diagnosis and before the surgery. But I mean, they missed quite a few key details, like me having previously been diagnosed with ADHD, my body image issues. Apparently, I even had some symptoms of an eating disorder and depressive symptoms and my social anxiety. And this was either like totally glossed over, right? Or they just saw it as like, oh, well, the reason why she's feeling that way is clearly because of the incongruency between her body and her gender identity, right? Like it was just made to be just a consequence of me being born in the wrong body.
They lumped it all into one misdiagnosed, maybe. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but it sounds
I
bad.
wouldn't
So the first
I wouldn't
time
necessarily say that the problem was the diagnosis or that it was a misdiagnosis. It's more like it's just not what would have been the appropriate treatment,
oh,
especially for a kid. Like
so
if
the remedy or the therapy or the cure was the misdiagnosis. They didn't treat you. I mean, I have a question in the future that I think will clarify this about who did that. But the first time I ever got wind of this was actually your Twitter feed before you were blocked, and then you came back to Twitter. And it was basically that due to the extreme amounts of LGBT propaganda, we now see a 15,000% rise in castration, sterilization, and mutilization clinics for children. It's a graphic from 2007 of pediatric gender clinics on top of 2022, and they are now everywhere, from maybe 3 or 4 to everywhere. And we all know about Vanderbilt, and Texas has now closed or paused them. At least we'll never really know. Well, we will know, but I'll repost this on my Twitter because it's better visual than to explain. But what is your experience? You know what I'm talking about? And what is your experience with the gender clinic situation?
Yeah,
Others?
I went through like multiple doctors and different clinics because I live in kind of out of the way of all of the like the biggest center of like all these services near me. At first, when my parents first started sending me to therapy, it was to a local like clinic with like a psychology center. And then once I started actually wanting to go on treatments and getting my diagnosis, I would like have appointments over the phone. Sometimes I would go to the Bay Area of California, I think like around like Oakland, San Francisco, to like see doctors. Um, and I had like different. I had a bunch of different therapists over the years. All of them were their treatment was pretty lousy, I would say. Like at
Yeah.
one point, I even had a therapist tell me like, "Oh, so if you're experiencing like suicidal ideation, you should download these apps to help you manage it."
Huh. I
Instead
knew
of teaching
I
me
knew
like
you were gonna I knew you were gonna end up saying, I didn't look into it, but I had a feeling you were gonna say the Bay Area. This show is about you, it's not about me, but I want to share
mm,
something with you to frame what I'm gonna ask you next. I hate Kaiser Permanente with the heat of 1,000 suns, maybe 10,000 suns. I grew up in California, Northern California, and I was a patient there my whole life, when it was, just a Bay Area thing. The first
mm,
HMO in the country. When I moved to LA for college, it was there. And so I didn't know any better and stuck with it. And I'm telling you this to frame this question. Okay, my dad died in 1977 in a Kaiser hospital. My mom died in 2013. They misdiagnosed her and gave her an ED drug, Viagra, which opened her capillaries of her lungs when they were imploding. And the opposite would have prolonged her life. And in the end, they stuck her in a room that overlooked my dad's grave.
oh my gosh.
I'm not making that up. They knew it too. My best friend and mentor died in that same Kaiser run hospital in Vallejo, California. My cousin spent his 40th birthday in LA Kaiser and died. I called it the death factory my whole life, and I couldn't wait for my first job to get a PPO and I'll get away from them completely. Believe it or not, if they came to me and said, "Steve, we'll give you $20 million to, as a contract to advertise on this show," I'd say, "Go to hell." I mean it. At 18, they put me on statins, which I've learned are very bad anyway. Um, Tell me about your experience in the early days with Kaiser doctors that diagnosed you.
I mean, throughout my life, their care has been kind of crappy. Like, I mean, I was born with a cleft palate, but we went out of their services to a different hospital to get my surgery and then eventually my second reconstructive surgery after that. So that wasn't with them, but for like
In
my
network
like the
though, right?
psychiatry needs, I mean they were the ones who were handling like my ADHD diagnosis and then my telling me that I was too smart to be autistic and then putting me on a bunch of meds and then eventually my gender dysphoria diagnosis.
Hmm. And how much do you think all the transition cost?
Um, I can't really say how much mine cost because I live in a state where all transition services by law are required to be covered by both, I think, private and public insurance companies. And so it was pretty much completely free, save for like $50 to $100 copays for appointments and stuff. But my parents were the ones who were mostly handling that, so I don't really feel like I can answer that. But some of the figures I've heard for like medically transitioning over a lifetime is like anywhere between like several 100,000 to maybe about like even 1 million for like people who get like facial and other cosmetic surgeries.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's
trans women, for example, getting like facial feminization.
big business. Now you're suing Kaiser. Tell us about the suit if you can.
Yeah, so um I mean, from the very beginning of my detransition, I knew what happened to me was wrong, was very wrong, and that there has to be thousands of other kids out there like me who are suffering through being put through these really mutilative treatments that will sterilize them and leave them dependent on pharmaceuticals for life. And I wanted to get justice for what happened to me and maybe eventually even set a precedent for other kids and other young adults who have been through this and who regret it and have been harmed by it to be able to get justice and the treatment that they need as well. But I didn't really know if I had a chance because these were treatments that were signed off on, that my parents did have to sign off on. And granted, it was under the pretense my mom and dad were told that I would literally die. It was life or death if I wasn't being allowed to medically transition as a minor.
Yeah, they use
But
emotional blackmail
Kaiser
to say
has,
either a dead boy or a live girl, that type of thing,
right,
right? Yeah.
right. That's exactly what they told them. Kaiser has a bunch of tricks up their sleeve, like especially with like litigation and such. And so for a while, as much as I wanted to sue them, I never thought that I had a chance until Harmeet Dillon from Center for American Liberty reached out to me through email last year, asking me if I was interested in a potential lawsuit. And I mean, it's been incredible talking with her and working with her. And I decided that I would go through with it, that I would sue Kaiser Permanente in the hospital where I underwent surgery, my surgeon, my endocrinologist, and my gender specialist who referred me between these services to prevent this happening from other kids ever again.
Does it look like it might be a class action lawsuit, or is it just you and Hermit against the big bad Kaiser?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not really well versed in such legal things, but yeah, I'm not really sure about like the technical details. I would say that Harmeet would be a better person to ask about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. She's had represents other people who've been on the show too. The Tavistock Hospital in the UK, there's over 1,000 lawsuits against those guys, and they had to close.
I'm
So
sure.
I hope you take them down. Let's put it that way. Do you want to have children in the future? Or what's the future for you now? What's your life like and going to be like going forward?
I absolutely want to have kids. I hope I have a
Okay.
big family one day, actually. That realization was one of the biggest reasons, actually, as to why I stopped transitioning. About 11 months, it hadn't even been like a full year after my surgery yet. I was like taking a psychology class and learning towards the end of the unit, towards the end of the course, about things such as like how, for example, like breastfeeding or just physical affection in general plays a part in how a mother and her infant bond over the course of her child's lifetime, and how that bond affects things like how well a child socializes and regulates themselves emotionally, and even things like their emotional intelligence. And like I was kind of devastated that, well, I'm never going to breastfeed now that my breasts are gone. And of course I was told this during the consultations for the surgery, but it never really hit me just how important that was, because none of this had ever really been stressed to me. I didn't even know that breastfeeding was more than just feeding your infant. And I thought that I was a boy. Like, as a man, why would I want to breastfeed my child? That is not what men do. But now that I was a bit older and knew about some of the really just basic details about parenting and how much it would mean to me as an adult. Well, I'd already had one big part of me as an aspiring mother, and also of my sexuality as a woman taken away from me. But if I were to continue going on these treatments, if I were to go further into it, I might not ever be able to have children naturally.
Do you know if you
And
can have children?
I still haven't gotten a fertility test. I can't really trust my doctors anymore, unfortunately, or Kaiser in general.
Mm, So
But I mean,
but you still have a menstrual cycle. You still do lady things, just
yeah,
without the
luckily
breastfeeding.
I started getting my cycle back about 2 months after I stopped taking testosterone, and it's been fairly regular since, which is a really big surprise because when I started taking testosterone, I'd only been having periods for maybe about like somewhere between like 1.5 to 2 years, and my cycle wasn't regular yet. I would only have about like one every 3 to 4 months out of the year. And I don't know what happened, if somehow I had developed a bit during the time that I was on testosterone, but I think it's kind of a miracle and it's a good sign, but I guess I'll just have to see. The tension is kind of killing me, but I guess it's not time for
Mhm.
that yet.
And they can't
Um,
reconstruct the chests and make it more. No, that's
I mean,
impossible.
they could make an attempt. They could make like a facsimile of breasts. It won't actually be breasts. Like the nerve endings, the erogenous sensation will never be back. And of course, I'll never be able to actually breastfeed my children because you can't replicate breast tissue. You can't grow it back, and the stalk, the glands of the that go through the nipple and excrete milk during lactation were severed. So I'm just never going to be able to do that.
And how do you feel when you see people? I don't want to name any celebrities that do this, but a lot of the magazines, a lot of the TV, like they're starting to flaunt the scars, the chest scars, as if it's romanticized, as if this is the greatest thing of all time. You saw at the White House the other day, the gal, you know, showing the muscles because she's transitioning. Does that just freak you out? Like, please don't look at that, or because they don't know what they're getting themselves into. How does that make you feel when you see that?
Um, in a way, and this is a word that I don't really like using just because people use it so flippantly and it's sort of lost its meaning over time, but it's almost kind of re-traumatizing seeing people go through what I did and just like they're flaunting it, they're acting like they're proud that they have these battle scars on these chests. They use phrases like that, like warrior scars, but you can see in their eyes, it's like they're dead inside almost, like they're worse off after the fact.
Yeah.
And it pains me to see that. Well, not
So
only that, they're going through the same kind of pain and losing a whole part of their bodies.
I mean, I
Well,
assume
they're
it is incredibly painful, right? It's not just like a quick removal of a skin lesion. I mean, we're talking massive surgery that you have to live with that scar and forever.
with the emotional pain on top of it. And for me, it
Emotional pain.
wasn't really that physically painful. It was more like a deep soreness in, say, like the pectoral area of my chest. But the emotional pain outweighed whatever physical pain I had from the treatment.
Yeah.
And
So
just seeing people being encouraged to go through this, with it being treated as seemingly the only option for their bodily dysphoria, it's just so painful to watch.
so if a 12-year-old Chloe Cole came up to you today and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of going through this transition. Should I?" What would you say?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is a treatment and a lifestyle, really, that is never, under any circumstances, appropriate for children ever. because, I mean, socially transitioning, for one, it might seem like it's benign, but you're taking on a new name and a new presentation, and you're actively making an effort to try to get people to see you and refer to you in a different way. And that is a lot of stress on its own. And there's a lot of social pressure to remain that way. There's a lot of shame in whether you've actually gone through the treatments or not, and realizing that you were wrong, and now you have to admit to your family, your friends, your peers, your coworkers that this was a mistake. But I mean, if you're a kid and you're going through social transition, you're not socializing as the sex that you actually are. And so oftentimes you'll end up missing out on some pretty crucial stages of social development, especially as a teenage girl. And the process of medically transitioning is, they call it life-saving care, but it's not life-saving. I mean, it's taking away perfectly healthy tissue and organs out of the body. It's removing function from a perfectly healthy being.
Yeah.
And I mean, the hormones, the puberty blockers are directly interfering with one's physical and sexual development, and even like their cognitive development.
We don't really know
to
the
which
long-term
extent.
effects, right?
Right. We don't know to which extent, but the findings we have so far are horrific. And that's why so many of the countries in Europe that pioneered this treatment are now going back on this. And they're not doing this on kids anymore. And it's a lot to expect of a kid to be able to make choices around, I mean, this affects pretty much every single area of your life, including like your sexuality, the way that you experience sexual function and bodily processes like orgasm, and your fertility, your ability to have kids,
what it means to be a
when you're
human
adult.
being. Yeah.
Right. And then that's a human right
And
to
you
grow
spoke
up with your fertility intact.
You would think, yeah, absolutely. And you spent time in front of, congressional hearings saying, please don't do this. And your state, my old state, just 2 years ago, 2020, they changed the insurance language on double mastectomies from gender dysphoric females, from cosmetic to reconstructive, specifically to remove age limits on the surgery. So the entire state, let's just say the government, is behind this movement to obliterate age-based advised in consent. Well, that's politics, but let's just say informed consent, to anyone who can pay for it can do it. Right?
Right. I mean, it's literally state-sponsored mutilation and sterilization of children and young adults, many of whom are on the spectrum. They have a learning disorder or intellectual disability. Many of them are gay or lesbian. Many of them have conditions like depression or anxiety or cluster B personality disorders. And many of them are simply just not necessarily conforming to the roles or expectations of their sex. Many of them are just tomboys or effeminate men who have been led onto a path, who've been led to believe that because they aren't necessarily feminine as a woman or aren't masculine in every way that's expected of them as a man,
By trusted doctors who are supposed to first do no harm. And obviously that is not. First get paid and make sure the check clears. I am out of time with you. This has been amazing. Are you currently being sponsored? How are you getting the word out, going from place to place? What's next in your life? And then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. So I fund my trips through donations, and I also work as a senior fellow with the nonprofit group Do No Harm as a patient who has been affected by these practices. Sorry, what was the next question?
Oh, what's next for your life? How are we going to follow you and make sure that
Right.
You have a happy ending into this story?
Well, I think that this is a battle that won't be fought for much longer. I mean, almost anybody who is not deeply entrenched into the ideology surrounding this can see that this is wrong, that we're so flippantly removing the organs, the sex organs of children and mentally ill young adults. And this is a battle that I think everybody should be fighting on, because it's affecting not only children, but whole families and entire institutions, especially of medicine and in schools. I'd say that it's going to be less than a decade, maybe less than even 5 years before all this stops.
I hope you're right.
The fallout, yeah, the fallout is going to be, it's going to last much longer than that. There's going to be a lot of kids quite like me who have been affected by this and have to live with this for the rest of their lives, and they need resources. And I'm trying to fight not only for this to stop, as for the standards of care for these patients with gender dysphoria to be changed, and for them being allowed to grow up into perfectly functional, healthy adults and live a fulfilling life. I want the people who have already been harmed by these treatments to get the care that they need. And once that's said and done, I think that there's still going to be a lot of issues in the world that need somebody to fight for, especially around things like family and children.
Awesome. Well, I hope you keep fighting like that. We are at the end here. Tell everyone how they can find you, follow your social, donate to you, anything you want to tell them. Go ahead and tell them.
Yeah, so I'm active on Twitter and Instagram, and my username is CHOOOCOLE. But you can find me just by looking up my name, Chloe Cole. And I've also started a YouTube channel as well, and I'm doing a series of interviews on other detransitioners. I recently did one on a girl named Layla Jane, who doesn't live all too far from me, and her story is quite similar to mine in that she transitioned medically as a minor, starting at the age of 12 with blockers and testosterone, and had a mastectomy at 13. And she has a very compelling story.
Awesome. Well, we wish you all the best. Please keep fighting for everybody who can't speak up as eloquently as you do. And I wish you really well. And it's so terrible what Kaiser did and what the psychologist did, but you have an optimistic spirit. And I think that is going to carry you all the way. And I just wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming on with us.
It was a pleasure being interviewed by you.
Thank you.
I'll write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Steve and Steve segment of our show where we cover what we just heard. Producer Steve, what'd you think of our guest, Chloe?
Well, Steve, thank you again for bringing on an amazing individual who is out there making a difference. And I was so struck by her courage to go out and speak and to recognize she made bad choices. I don't want to go over that again, but I just want to let everybody know that off air, I asked her, Chloe, through all this, have you had come to know the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior? And she said, yes, just recently. I'm brand new to this. And I want to let you know, folks, no matter what you've done to yourself, even to others, you can get on your knees and ask Jesus Christ to come in and take over your life and lay your burdens down at the cross and ask for his forgiveness and healing. And he will come in and he will make you a brand new creation. Yes, you can't replace those breasts. No, you can't replace the broken relationships. No, you can't fix the damage that's been done, but you can start fresh and have an eternity to look forward to. And God is going to use this young lady mightily. And the second thing is, Steve, I wanted to get your reflections on this. Your daughter is about the same age. This must really hit you in the heart.
Yeah, Yeah. Chloe's struggles and her decision making and her ultimate correcting course is really one of the catalysts that let me understand that a phone at the wrong age, social media, the wrong apps, TikTok, Instagram, letting a private girls club open the locker rooms to biological males was all on the wrong path. Not that I didn't think I had enough common sense to figure out in the first place, but to see what they were trying to do to young, impressionable girls like this. Now, mine, I'm blessed, was not diagnosed with autism or misdiagnosed. And so I know that it's even worse when the susceptibility is already there. Then you throw in the loneliness, the childhood depression, the being a girl in the first place, and how hard that is, which I can empathize with being a man because I'm a father, not because I'm a girl. But yeah, absolutely. I see all that, and I'm just so thankful that she came on to me. But this is goodbye for a little while. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, even while I'm gone, and pass it around, even in reruns. We only grow with your help, and still ad-free. Back in August. Enjoy the reruns. Maybe off air, we'll get that piece in our time. I'll work on it in Europe. Glory to God. At Heartland Journal, we don't just write about the Heartland, we're part of it. Whether you're in Montana cattle country, next to an Idaho data center in a drought, or from an Ohio manufacturing town, this is your platform. Got a story tip? A perspective we need to hear? We want it. This podcast and website exists because readers like you step up. Help us keep the lights on and the reporting honest. Visit heartlandjournal.com or our Substack, Heartland Journal, and subscribe to our ad-free premium content. Together, we're keeping authentic journalism alive in Middle America. I'm Steve Abramowitz, your host of the Heartland Journal podcast. Thanks for listening.
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.